everybody. And today, our special guest, David. Welcome, David. So, David is with us today because we are going to be talking about waste. And we've touched on waste a bit in some of our other videos. We've touched on type 1 and type 2 waste. There are the 7 lean waste, I think it is. But today we're talking about a real life experience where David actually was with a client and how he helped the client identify waste and take care of it, essentially. So I remember when David told me this story, I found it fascinating. So David, I'm gonna hand it over to you. Just talk us through, where did you also come up with this idea? How did you realize waste was an issue at this organization? Like, walk us through your steps in coaching this organization on how to identify and get rid of waste.
Sure. Thanks, Alana. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, it was a really interesting organization because the organization had gone completely into Agile, like blow it up, follow all the rules. And so the process of Agile purportedly is enough in some people's minds to produce Agile results. And so we just went with it. We dissolved all the teams. We set up, cross-functional feature teams. And then we started servicing the customers. There was a backlog. It was a rolling backlog because of the nature of the work. And we started sprinting away. One of the important things that was done very early on was to begin to measure the throughput, both before and after. And we noticed about 2-3 months into this new way of working that throughput was pretty bad. It was about half what it used to be, and leadership was getting concerned and the coaches were getting concerned, and people were finding themselves frustrated. Some people were working very hard. Everybody else was working kind of frenetically. I don't know if they were hard, but it wasn't adding up to throughput. And so we knew there had to be waste in the process somewhere. But after carefully checking that each team was following all the rules of Agile, we still couldn't find the problem. And so I started looking at it from a system flow perspective, from a lean perspective, and looking for lean wastes. Some of the top lean wastes that are common are, waiting, handoffs, rework. I think people are probably familiar with those. And we did see a lot of those things, going on, but we didn't have a clear view. So what we did is we produced kind of a high-level process map of the work that was happening and flowing through the teams, and theorized about where these wastes might be. And so we noticed that there was a lot of developers waiting for information. We noticed that certain people were doing a lot of task switching, and we knew that those were some of the big wastes. So what we simply asked everybody to do was, for a period of 5 days, have a little piece of paper next to their workstation. And every time they either put down work in order to do something else, or found themselves waiting for something, to make a tick mark and also to make a note. And after 5 days, we looked at this and a very clear pattern emerged. You see, this organization had around 60 different systems written in 40 different technologies, maintained by 50 developers. Those numbers might be slightly off, but you get the idea. Part of the cross-functional feature team move was to empower people to take on new roles. That doesn't mean they had the knowledge needed to do so. And so the people, as it turned out, who were doing the most task switching were the subject matter experts in either the business or the systems that were being worked on. And the people who were doing the most waiting were the people who were new to those areas of technology or systems. In fact, it was massive. So what we did was diagram out the major choke points by just looking at visually how work flowed through the developer system. It was similar to impact mapping, but I called it waste mapping because we were looking for bottlenecks. And we theorized, if we changed some things, if we changed some quantities, what would happen to throughput? So it turned out there were a couple of key systems that only a couple of people knew. And we said, well, if more people knew those systems, we would expect the throughput of this entire development organization to go up by X%. We formed a Kaizen committee, a Kaizen crew that would meet every 2 weeks and theorize ways of changing and impacting this waste map, updating it. And we did that for about 6 months. One of the major things that really came out was a big decision to take the people who knew the systems and say, your job is no longer to write code, your job is to teach. And the people who were waiting for information now became learners. And there was a period of about 6 weeks where that was the focus. And then we measured throughput after that period, and it had gone up by about 30%. So we did it again more broadly. We gave everybody in the department a matrix, and people chose learning objectives and teaching objectives. And everybody had to teach something and learn 2 other things. We did that for another 2 months, and throughput had doubled at the end of that period. We continued to do those things until we ran out of a way to have impact by changing skills. After about, I'd say, 8 months total, things started to plateau. So we went right back to the drawing board and said, now where's the waste in the system? And we repeated the process.
So, David, I'm curious, sorry to interrupt you here, but I'm curious, how do you sell leadership on, okay, we're going to actually take your most valuable, most productive people, and now they're going to teach, and they're not going to do anything for a while. How do you sell that to leadership, knowing that this was like something that you hadn't done there yet?
Well, leadership was in a bit of a pickle because they had gotten behind making this wholesale change to an agile way of working. And they had a certain amount of honeymoon credit with their stakeholders, but that credit was running out. And the situation had gotten worse, and there wasn't a plan for making it better. So they were motivated to try anything. The harder sell was to the subject matter experts themselves, who are used to being the critical people. And that was a matter of bringing them into the process, bringing them into the room, and helping them see where the bottleneck is, and then say, we'll try this for a limited period of time. And if we don't see an improvement, then you're in charge. We'll stop. We'll try something else.
I remember, David. Did you ever revoke commit rights for the specialists? I think that was one of the.
Yeah, that was one of the early management proposals that was put on the table, and we didn't go with that, at least as Plan A, because we felt voluntary, like getting people on board would be more impactful. And I think by and large we were able to get people on board. Again, by giving them the choice and investing them in the outcome, and showing them that they were being successful, and also giving them permission to say, okay, we tried that, it was stupid, let's do something else.
So David, what I'm interested in is going back to the waste element of this. So when you were doing that kind of waste mapping, like what were the reactions of the people in the system and like the management? Like, was it intuitive for them, or was it like a shock, or did they, talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, actually the way we approached it actually diminished some of that. So we didn't initially say, hey, let's do a waste map, because that would have felt like a theoretical exercise. Instead, we asked people to put on Post-it notes, and these were people who were in sort of a practicing management role, so they were close to the teams. They were either scrum masters or technical leads, and we just said, write down what you think is holding back throughput. And then we clustered them based on themes. And then we mapped those clusters of Post-it notes to the identified 7 lean wastes. And so we kind of stepped them in from things they sort of had observed anyway, built the theoretical framework around it, and then applied it systematically on a map so we could pinpoint where exactly the bottleneck is. And that's one of the biggest challenges with waste. You might know what the problem is, but you don't always know where to push in order to have an impact. And that's where the mapping really helped.
Yes, David, related to that, I was thinking myself, I'm not so used to this type of I mean, I know Agile, but not as you do. And when you said like you started to identify the waste, I was thinking, okay, maybe they are taking a long time up on this. Let's adjust a process. And what you did was more like on another level, no, like providing them with skills and tools to improve the time and to make it less. So that for me was wow. No, it's something that is tangible. The problem, you can see it. The solution might be something that is not so visible, right? It's
yes.
Like you learn. When you found out that there was an improvement, is this an approach that it is a continuous improvement of identifying waste and then get rid of it, and then again
Yes.
and again? Is it a continuous improvement approach?
Yes, I'll actually take your question in two parts.
Okay.
Yeah, why didn't we just suggest a process change that made sense to leadership and the coaches? This has to do with the integral approach. So we looked at the visible, the visible product, the upper right quadrant, which is what's actually occurring. And what's actually occurring is low throughput. And then we went, okay, so now more detailed, where is that occurring? Where are the bottlenecks actually located? That was the most important first step, because we could have suggested any number of process changes, and I don't think we would have hit on the one that actually had the impact. So there's three rules when you, there's three steps, I should say, when you encounter a bottleneck. If it's obvious, the first thing you do is counterintuitive. The first thing is actually protect the bottleneck. So if you can only ship, as much of this one, if there's one guy who knows stuff, then the first thing to do is to not give the system more work than the bottleneck can handle. Otherwise, it just piles up and you get even more task switching plus rework. Okay, so you lose quality. Number two is then expand the bottleneck. And that's what we did with the teaching strategy. And then number three is then to look for the next bottleneck, because you've eliminated that and now there's another one in the system. So back to the continuous improvement, we actually did reach the point where we had removed that bottleneck enough that there was another bottleneck in the system. But that's probably going to be the topic of a follow-on session, because what we wound up doing in response to that inquiry was breaking some of the fundamental process rules of Agile in order to double the throughput yet again in the ensuing 6 months.
David, this has been super insightful. And I love that it also wasn't just like, oh, well, we've got these junior people who are waiting. Let's just hire more senior people, and then we'll just throw more people at it and resources, and let's complicate the system even more. And what you did was just very cool, so integral. We are definitely going to have you back again. I'd love to hear more just about the training and like what went on there and how you got people on board, because that itself is just the whole topic. So David, thank you so much for joining us today. This was fantastic. Those of you watching, we hope you enjoyed this, found it useful. Let us know in the comments below what you think. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. So Ben, Eddie, Lucci, and our special guest today, David, thank you so much. And we will see you next time.